Okay, Jenny, I hit record, so it looks like we are ready to record this. So I'm at home in my studio. This is my practice room. This is like my sunroom. Oh, here, I can shut these doors. Then you don't see my mess. You might still see my vacuum cleaner sitting right there. So anyhow, this is my practice studio. This is my home. So you wanted to know how to use mags, and I reached out to you and said, oh, I'll help you because I love using mags. And then you were so generous to let me record this on Zoom. So if we like it, we'll share it. If we don't like it, we won't share it. So
Okay.
what I want to start out by saying is I want you to think of a mag as just a cartridge with more pins. Okay. So, of course, I'm using my brand, the MicroPMU Tattoo Supply brand, but do you use like a 7-round shader?
Yes.
Okay. So when you use a 7-round shader, right? Essentially, if you use a 7 curved mag, which is my favorite, you're using the same cartridge, or I should say the same number of needles, but they're just positioned differently. So I think when people start, the word mag is kind of intimidating, like, oh my God, it's a mag. But if you start thinking of it as just a different configuration of 7 needles, it kind of takes some of that pressure off. Now in PMU, and I know a lot about needles because I've designed them. I've actually gone to factories, studied metals, soldering, all that kind of stuff. In a 7 curved mag, which is what I like when we use it for PMU, is the curved. The two needles on the end are kind of pulled in. So in our world, we do like a lot of whip shading, pendulum, things like that, right? So when we're coming down onto the skin, sliding across and coming off and coming back down on, if those 2 end pins are pulled in, you're less likely to snag the skin. So if these 2 end pins are sticking out like this, then when you come down onto the skin, that one that's sticking out is going to hit first. And then you're going to come across. And then when you come up like this, that end pin that sticks out has more of a reason to, or, can more likely snag. So if you think about the 7 curved mag, obviously if we have a round shader, the needles are in a round positioning, right? In a 7 curved mag, they're just 2 rows. The front row is a little shorter and the back row is a little bit higher. What that does is it gives us a lot of flexibility. It's almost like a sloped needle. So in our industry, the problem is people put out classes and they're like, oh, nobody sold this. So let me use a curved mag on an eyeliner and let me, do this. And pretty soon we're finding ourselves like we're using cartridges in ways that they weren't designed to be used. And that can be dangerous. So a mag can be, oh, there goes my phone. Okay. A mag can be used to line. It can be used to do ovals. It can be used to do back and forth. It can essentially, you can do anything with it that you do with your 7-round shader, only you can line because the pins are straight and in a straight row. And if you think about a 7-round shader, because it's round, it kind of makes more sense to go in circles, right? The mag, because it's oblong, a lot of people will do circles. I kind of have better luck if I do ovals, just because they're this way, right? They're not round. So just some things I was playing with, and then we're going to play live. But like, this is just an example. This is, if you can see that, that's 2 passes with a mag. And it just puts in, so you can put in so much pigment so quickly. And I think that's why people are afraid of them. A mag is different than no other cartridge. So like if you're using a 7-round shader and you're doing a powder brow, what voltage are you at?
I use the critical And
Okay.
I'm usually at like a 6.5.
Okay. So your
Yeah.
hand speed is just a little different than mine because
Mhm.
I'm critical as well. And
Mhm.
if I'm using a 7 round shader and I'm powdering, I'm usually at about 5.5.
Mhm.
Okay. So our hand speed is a little bit different. So the mag is no different. And I just did this to show you right before we jumped on it than any other needle. So I don't know if you can see that or not, but these are just the same things, right? So what did I do? I did like a whip shading, and then I did some ovals, and then I did back and forth, and I did some lining. But this is
Mhm.
at 5.9 and this is at 8. So if you look at the second one in, this is ovals at 5.9 and this is ovals at 8.
Mhm.
So your hand speed has to match your cartridge, just like it does anything else, because obviously at 8, the
Mhm.
machine is moving faster, right? So the pins are going in and out faster. So it's
Mhm.
depositing more ink because I use my same hand speed, just my natural rhythm on both of these, but at a higher voltage, those needles are going in and out faster.
Mhm.
So when you start practicing with mags, um, it makes sense to kind of practice at a little bit of a lower voltage. And then what I teach my students to do is like practice at 5.5 and then practice at 6 and then practice at 6.5 until you find like the right density that you would like, to do your eyebrows with. The incredible thing about mags is once you play with them, you guys know me, I'm real, right? Like there's nothing fake about me. So I'm going to show you this with my cat hair all over it because I'm surprised my cat's not up here getting in the video. She usually is. Um, these, I was working with students. The top one is a 1RL and the bottom one is a 5 mag. So when you start working with a mag and you get really good with a mag, you can actually even do hair strokes with a mag. And I guess that's what I love about it. And that's why I love teaching the mag. And I'm excited that you're learning it because you can't do that with a shader, right? Because
Mhm.
you can't do a hair stroke with a line.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing that you can do, oh, and when you're practicing at your different voltages, because I'll have you send me some pictures, always make sure that you're writing what you're using, like a 1RL, how many volts you'll be using, a 7 mag, and what cam strength you're using, because all of that is important. Do you have more than one machine or do you just use one?
I just used the one, and I had reached out to you before, and I was going to buy the flux, and then I haven't done that yet. So I'm just using the peak, but I don't know how happy I am with it. And also, I don't know anything about cams.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, do you know what cam that is?
No.
Okay. Um, so and this is kind so when you start using a mag, I teach people it's not just the cartridge, right? There's a lot more that plays into it, like your voltage speed, how heavy-handed you are, your cam. So you can find out what cam that is and let me know.
Mhm.
But just think about this. Like I saw, oh my God, it's called a blackout. I've never seen this before, but the Valhalla, which is what I'm using, which goes from a
Mhm.
2.5 up to a 4.2 cam. So a cam is kind of how hard it's good, the needle is going to hit the skin, right? So if
Mhm.
it's a 2.5 cam, it pulls back the needle 2.5 millimeters and lets it go. If it's a 4.2, it pulls it back 4.2 and lets it go. So think about a bow and arrow. If you just pull it back a little and let go, the arrow goes like about 2 feet and drops on the ground, right? But if you pull it back really far, it creates that momentum and it goes all the way to the target. So that's what your cam is. So this blackout, they were using 123 pin mag. Never even
Wow.
heard of it. And just like the whole guy's skin, they were making his whole arm black. And I'm like, oh my God. But they were using the Valhalla and the 4.2 cam. So the strongest one, right? The one that's going to hit your target was pushing 123 pins and pushing them into the
Wow.
skin. So I usually have two machines set up. So when I have if I have a softer cam, I put like, if I'm using say a 1 RL and a 7 mag for my brow,
Mhm.
I'll put my 1 RL in the machine with the softer cam, and then
Mhm.
I'll put my mag in the machine that has the larger cam. Because just think, if you've got more needles, sometimes it's beneficial to have a little bit more strength behind it, especially if
Right.
you're working like on tough skin.
Mhm.
So what we'll do today is we'll literally just do what you can do with the mag. So we'll just do some circles. We'll do some at 90, or ovals. We'll do some at 90. We'll do some at an angle, and I'll show you that. I'm going to show you something that's never been shown before, only to the PMU
Ooh.
collaborative. But I don't know how you practice on
Mhm.
Reelskin, but of course, I recommend PMU Reelskin because I designed it.
Mhm.
It's the closest to the face as far as depth and skin possible. But here's what I've never shown anybody before. We do this in the collective or the collaborative all the time. So if you want to keep designs on your Reelskin, okay, let's make sure you can see this. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so you take your Reelskin, you take Speed Stick, the deodorant, put it on your Reelskin over your cat hairs. Okay, then you take baby powder. And I'm on my computer, so it's so funny because I kind of have to, I've got it pointed down, so I got to bend. Okay, take it, rub it on your skin. Plus it smells really good. If you like the smell of baby powder, which I do, because it reminds me of babies. Okay, take a graphite pencil, and now you can draw on your skins, and it's going to stay there
Oh, wow.
when you're practicing. So that's actually how they did stencils before they had like stencil stuff and stuff like that. And then you can actually wipe it off. I mean, it's not going to stay forever, right? But it's definitely going to stay much, much better than if before you use the deodorant and the baby powder. So that's just
Oh,
something I
great.
wanted to show you because you're probably going to practice brows.
Mhm.
So when you use a mag, like I said, just remember, don't make it intimidating because you really, let's see, I got to come back down to my speed here. I was up at like 8. Just think of it as 7 needles.
Mhm.
Now a mag, when you use a mag, it doesn't hold as much ink. It holds it differently, right? Because the shape is different. And if you put a lot of ink in here, a lot can come out at one time, depending on your needle length. So I like to have my needles out. I like to see them. And you probably can't see how far those are out, can you? They're
Little
probably
bit,
out
yeah.
about between a dime and a nickel.
Mhm.
The reason I like to have them out that far is because I like to tip up and use them, like what you saw in this. You know, I like to be able to tip them up and do a line with it if I want to be able to do a line with it. So that's
Okay.
why I like mine out a little
Mhm.
bit further. One thing that you might see people doing is having them in so close that when they're actually down on the pad, it's called like riding the cartridge, and the plastic is touching the skin, and you don't really want that.
Okay.
So if you tip them back, so you have the opening there and you can see your needles because that's at a slant, you know,
Mhm.
if you tip it back and you use just one set of needles, you know, you actually can line with the needles. So you can go back and forth and back and forth and line with the needles. And this is how you do your hair strokes too. But you can see in the beginning that extra pigment coming out. So it's
Mhm.
one thing that you got to remember with mags is that if you touch that, you can get that extra pigment, okay? So you can line with the mag just by tipping it up, and you can make a thicker line with it,
Mhm.
okay? Or you can make a thinner line with it, okay? You can do ovals with it. So if I'm doing ovals at an angle, I've got to get a little bit more pressure in there to get those front pins in, because remember, the pins are a little bit different. Okay, so you can do ovals. Or you can have the pins straight up and down and do ovals. And you're going to get two different, completely different things. Okay, or you can do, you know, your back and forth. And you can kind of pixelate with these, but it's not going to be a pretty pixelation like what you get with a 1RL, you know, where you get each
Mhm.
individual dots.
Mhm.
I don't really recommend a lot of like whip shading, you know, like this, because you can really snag the skin, especially if you're using that, you know, regular curved, or I mean, regular mag.
Mhm.
But you can cross hatch with them. So you can go this direction. And then you can just turn it and go this direction. So you can really use them like you use anything else. I just kind of do more ovals than I do circles. I'm at 5.5 right now, but you can do lines, you can do ovals, you can just go back and forth. Again, I don't really like the whip shading or the pendulum. I mean, you can whip shade with it too. You can start in one spot. But the problem is you've got those two lines. So it doesn't really, when it starts, like if you're whip shading, I gotta grab a paper towel here. If you're whip shading, you know, with like a one liner or something, and you're doing the tail of a brow, you're going to get that nice crisp point there. But with a mag, it's really hard to get that. Or you can cross hatch and go back and forth. So let me just. Wipe some of this off. I didn't have another pigment at home. This is something that they sent me that I was testing, and it's so concentrated. It's so hard to use on real skin. See how you can see how I wiped across that brow? And
Right.
it's still there. Like it,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't last forever, but normally if you wiped across that, it would be gone, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I should have done this bigger. I always do this in my videos so small. So let me see if you guys can see this now. So can you see that line right there? How I lined the bottom of that brow?
Yeah.
So when you tip it up like that and you start playing with them, you know, brows are super easy to line because they're straight, but you can line like the majority of the lip if you're using mags on lips. Just remember, lips are a mucosa, so they're already filled with water, right? It's completely different than tattooing the skin. So you need to really be careful with your pressure. And again, use that curved mag. But look at I mean, that's just what, 2 seconds you saw me do that. Look at the difference. I always want to point this out. See that one versus this one? This is the one where I had the mag slanted, right? And this
Right.
is the one where I had it straight up and then back and forth cross hatching. See how it doesn't really do as much for a kind of like a whip shading, you know, cross
Mhm.
hatching and ovals are a lot better, but, and back and forth. The reason that does that is I want you to think about if you use the mag at a 90-degree angle, the pins are going in and out, right? So
Mhm.
just like any other needle that you use up and down. Well, when you go like this, the the needles go in at a slant. So
Mhm.
they're kind of color packing that ink under the skin, right? If anything goes in at a 90-degree angle, think about like a volcano. Like, how does a volcano spew?
Mhm.
Like it spews up through the top, right?
Right.
So if something goes in at 90 degrees, it can come out at 90 degrees. But if you come in at an angle and you put that under the skin, when you pull that needle out, that flap of skin where you went in kind of falls back over.
Right.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then you
Yeah.
pull your needle out. So it's not like a volcano, right? So it's in body art, they a lot of people will call it color packing, or you'll see it done on areolas, or you'll see like if somebody's having a hard time getting pigment into the skin. You
Mhm.
know, a mag, you can do that really, really well with because of the formation of the needles. I mean, it's
Mhm.
almost like a shovel, right? You can just kind of shovel it in there. And because they're formatted like this, it just kind of slides into the skin. Where if you've got
Mhm.
something that's oval, it and you tilt it, it's harder to slide it into the skin, right? So you can really, like if you're doing an ombre, you can
Mhm.
really do an ombre fast by just tilting that cartridge just a little bit.
Mhm.
So why don't you turn your machine on and try something? And you've never used a mag before, right?
Never. So, and the one I have is a 5
Yep.
curve.
So
I
all
could
that
not
means is
find
you've
any
got, yep,
7.
3 pins and 2 pins.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
So there's always, so like a 5, a 7 has 4 pins and 3 pins. I don't even know what that 123 has. I don't even know if that's 2 or 3 layers. I just know that's
Right.
big. Yep. So a lot of people, I use a 7 curved mag because I can use it on the brows and the lips and I'm good to go. I tried to not stock a bazillion cartridges, you know,
Mhm.
but a lot of people like 5s for brows, especially if you're doing a thinner brow. And
Mhm.
then they'll do like a 7 or a 9 or a 13 or something bigger on the lips,
Mhm.
especially if you've got a bigger lip. So it's all just a matter of preference.
So now a quick question. Do you ever use it in like a raking motion where
Yes.
they come across this way?
Yep. And actually, that's a really great question because so I always teach dimensional tattooing. So I
Mhm.
like to do different techniques so that some parts are airy, some parts are more dense.
Mhm.
So I actually do hair strokes by raking. I
Okay.
literally, if I do a nice powder brow and they've
Mhm.
got some hairs, but I just want to fill in some spaces, I literally will turn the machine and just rake it right through the brow. So
Okay.
absolutely, I rake a lot and then you're just
Okay.
raking it right through the brow.
All
Mhm.
right. Good to know.
Good question. Yeah, I do that a lot. You have good questions. I'll give away all my secrets.
I
So
don't
do you
have
have
my
it set on
glasses
about
on.
6.5?
I've got it on 6.5. Should I turn it
Okay.
down a little bit?
No, go ahead and do that if that's
Okay.
your natural hand speed.
Okay.
And just do like some circle or ovals, do like some back and forth. Just kind of get used to playing with it a little bit and then show me what you got. The machine's quiet.
Is it? Because I was thinking it's so loud.
Oh, I can't hear it.
Oh, okay. You know, I do definitely want to get a new machine though. So I think I probably will get the Flux, or the Valhalla is what you were using, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me grab a paper towel really quick.
Okay. So you guys, like she said, I do a lot of raking. Let me put this on here. And raking just means that you're using it in the other direction. So you guys can see this. So when I was doing this, I had it turned this way. Now I like to turn it so that I can see the needles, so that the slope is showing and I can see the needles. And that's how I was doing this outline. But raking, you guys, is turning it this other way. So if you were going to rake through a brow, you literally could use it like a rake and rake through the brow. Now, this isn't going to replace hair strokes or anything like that, but it's just going to give you another dimension. And actually allow you to rake through the brow. And you can do, you know, as much or as little as you want to, but I just wanted to show you that
Now,
you
is
can.
that something you would do when you're doing a powder brow, just to add in a little more dimension to it?
Yeah, like sometimes you can see I would have, so, oh, what I should have done, usually when I rake and go through it like that, I turn the voltage up. That's why this is so light. I didn't turn the voltage up because I want those lines to show, right? So then it's more like I'm lining and not shading. So I'll turn my voltage up to 8. So yeah, it's just to add some dimension, because it's nice because you can rake through and just follow some of the hairs that they have. And it just puts that different dimension behind their hairs. So you have their hairs and then you have a nice soft powder. I mean, it's really no different than a blade and shade. You're just adding a different dimension, only it's not just one individual stroke. It's just,
Right.
it really ends up looking like a series of dots just going in opposite direction and following their natural hairs. But I do that a lot.
Good.
Okay.
All righty. Can you see?
Good. Yeah. So the dot, was that now angled, or that was angled? And
That was
then
angled.
next to it was straight up and down?
Yes.
Yeah. See, hold that up again. See how you can tell the difference? I mean, I knew right away what you did because it just packs in so much more ink. So if you're, you know, if you're doing back and forth, you're going, you know, kind of, because you don't want to create those lines, right? So you're kind of going back and forth and you're never stopping or starting in the same position. But when you're using a mag, if you've got it tilted and you're doing ovals, you tend to stay in one position a little bit longer. So that's where you got to be really careful, because you can really implant the ink when doing those ovals and staying in one place too long, especially if you haven't practiced on your real skin and you've got your voltage set too high and those needles are going in and out and in and out. So do a couple more things. Try kind of like just a nice back and forth, like you would kind of powder a brow.
Okay.
And it is our skin has a pattern to it, right? Just like your practice skin has a pattern to it. So if you go one way and you keep going back and forth one way, you're going to see that pattern in the skin and you're going to see it on your practice skin. So if it's really important with mags, it's important with any needle, but if you don't like what you're seeing, don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? Don't go, okay, that's one pass. Now I'm going to do 2 passes. Now I'm going to do 3 passes because you're
Right.
creating that same natural pattern that skin has to it.
Mhm.
So with a mag, if you do a pass and you see an area that needs to be filled in, don't do like a whole nother pass. Just go back and either do a quick little oval or do a cross hatch, go the other way to
Mhm.
fill that area in. Because remember, you're just going to get so much more pigment, especially like say a lot of people only use 1 and 3s, right? So then you go from a 3 or a 1 to a 7 mag, you've got more than double the needles. So your technique has to be a little bit different, right? You're not going to go pass after pass after pass because they're going to end up with an eyebrow, looking like that.
Right. Right.
And the other thing to mention too is, like, where's my lady here? My lady's really beat up because we use her a lot. Actually, I got tape over her mouth. It looks like I'm gagging her. But remember with a mag, because you've got those extra pins, especially if you've got that one on the outer side, when you're, on the tail, that's the thinnest skin, right? It's so thin. So I tell a lot of people, when I do brows, I start with my tail and I work my way across. But if you're new to mags, it doesn't hurt to just kind of go through an area that's a little bit thicker and just to make sure you've got your stretch and you've got that feel. Because it's like anything else, right? You want a nice stretch. If you get a nice stretch, it's going to kind of float across and pixelate a little bit better. And then you can kind of start working down to your tail, but don't do a big section and then wipe. Do like a little section and then wipe, and just make sure that when you start using them, your hand speed and voltage is correct, your pressure is correct. Because otherwise, especially down here, you know how you see brows and they have like all those blowouts and those little dark dots. I mean, all it takes, you saw the difference, right? You saw it on yours. All it takes is to go from a 90-degree angle and turn it this way on a tail and do a few ovals, and you're going to get a dark spot like what you have. So on the 90, and I have but we did it on purpose. So on the tails, really kind of stay at that 90-degree, especially while you're getting used to them. And then you come up into the skin. And if you want to turn a little bit more here, or you want to do an ombre, so you want this a little bit darker, you can turn it a little bit darker and then just kind of stand it up as you come up towards the top. Because if we put, let me see your paper again. Let me see what you just did. Yes. Was that just one?
Yes, and I did it angled again.
Okay.
You need to try and do it straight up.
Yep, that's a lot of pigment. So if you put these 2 dots together, if you put, I can't put them together on my practice skin, but if you put those 2 together, that's a nice powdered or ombre brow, right? Yeah, or an ombre, because you've got darker down here and lighter on the top. So a lot of times with my mags, that's what I start out doing when I'm down here on the bottom, is I'm just a little bit more angled. And as I come up to the top, then I straighten it out. And that gives you that nice gradient from bottom to top and dark to light. Say, but on here on the tail, turning it, especially if you're not used to mags, can be kind of dangerous.
Right. Okay. Yeah, good to know.
Yeah. So what do you think? Any other questions? I mean, I'm excited that you're going to start to use them. I know I love Taryn Darling. I've followed her for 10 years. And I know one time she said a joke, because people that come from body art are like, why do you use a 1RL to do a brow? That's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So she said to somebody one time, she goes, you use your 1RL, I'm going to use my mag. We'll meet for a drink afterwards and I'll have, like 3 tequilas before you even get there. Because the more pins, the more ink that gets implanted. That means less time, less chance for inflammation to start, less lymph production, just, all that stuff. It works. when you get used to them and you use them, they work for
Mhm.
brows, they work for lips. I know people have taken them to eyes, but please don't ever do that. Why? You don't need it. That's the thinnest skin on the body. That's too dangerous. You don't need that cartridge there. But yeah, I think you'll enjoy them.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking the time to teach me how to use them.
Yeah, well,
I
thank you for
appreciate it.
jumping on here and also saying that I could share it. Like I said, I've got to figure out how to kind of answer everybody's questions in a format where I can put it out there, but not spend 4 hours a day teaching on top of my 8-hour workday. So
Will you tell me really quick about
Yeah.
the collaborative? So I've read a little bit about it. And I've read that it's a 3-month process. What happens in that 3 months?
So what happens, and I have to say, first of all, that I'm really proud of Laura and myself. It's something that I've been wanting to do for years, but you always have that fear as an instructor that nobody will take your class if you tell somebody it's a 3-month class, right? Because they'll be like, oh, why do I want to take a 3-month class? I can take a 2-day class, or I can learn on YouTube, or I can do whatever. So what the collaborative is, thank you for asking, because that was not scripted,
No.
is it starts from the very beginning. So it starts with business acumen, and it talks about LLCs and sole proprietorship and how to set your business up, and tax deductions and leases versus commissions or renting, or because there's so many in the 10 years that I've done this. I have a huge business background. I've owned and run many businesses. I've come across so many talented artists that are really talented, but they don't know how to run a business. So they fail because they don't know how to run a business. So we start there. So you have a live, just like we're doing now, every 2 weeks. And then you have 2 weeks of time to do your homework, because I give lots of homework and I hold you accountable, because I feel like that's how we all succeed, right? Is accountability and doing things like at my practice table. Then we go into color theory, Fitzpatrick scale, pigmentology, MSDS sheets. We teach you everything that you need to know about the equipment you're going to use. We go into machines, we go into cams, we go into all of the needles. We discuss things like, and I'm going to do another live on this, but people are like, oh, that needle causes more trauma, or that needle causes more trauma. Well, if they're used properly, one's not going to cause more trauma than the other. You just have to know how to use the needle, use the machine. So we go through all of that. Then we actually teach you how to tattoo. So I feel like we have to learn how to tattoo before we can PMU, right? Like a 2-day class and you can do a brow. That's crazy. You can't even learn wound care in 2 days. I have 2 medical degrees and a physics degree. You can't even learn that in 2 days. So, wound care is another thing we go through. Aftercare we go through, numbing agents we go through, all of that. But then we teach you how to tattoo. So we teach you how to do pointillism, and we teach you how to do back and forth and circles and pendulum and whip shading, and we teach you how to do all of those techniques. And then you have practice sessions where you do all of those, and then we bring it all together. So I don't like teaching like I don't like teaching, like, say, here you go, Jenny, this is how you do a powder brow. You use this technique and this needle, and then that's it. Now you can do a powder brow, right? Well, that's not true, because what if you're doing your 18-year-old daughter versus your 78-year-old grandmother? Like, it's going to be totally different. So when you learn all the pigments, all the Fitzpatrick, all the pigmentology, you learn all the needles, you learn the machines, you learn tattooing techniques, then you can put it all together and go, oh, wait, okay, I know I'm going to use this needle on my, 18-year-old daughter because this is her skin type, and I'm going to use an inorganic pigment. And, and then when you do your grandmother, you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to use a softer cam, and I'm going to use, a larger configuration needle. Her skin is thinner. I'm going to use this type of pigment. And so we teach you. That's why it takes 3 months. And I would have made it 6 months personally if I could have, but then I know nobody would have signed up for it. They would have thought I was really crazy. But teaches you all of that. So like if you look at my eyebrows, you can go, oh, Mary, that's a powder with a few hair strokes. So if I use this machine at this setting and I've got all my practice material, so I know I use this voltage, I can go ahead and give you a nice powder and run a few rakes through there with a mag, and it'll look just like what you have.
Mhm.
So that's what it is. It's about, so we've got people in there that have been in the business for 8 years, 10 years,
Mhm.
and we've got people that are brand new. So it can either be new or it can just kind of be a reset. Because a lot of what we've learned too is old, right? Like we took classes a long time ago and now the pigments are pre-modified and now we have more needle choices. And so it's just a really good learning experience. So we're in the middle of a 3-month session now, and Laura and I are actually going to take December off. And it'll start, the next session will start again in January.
Okay.
So,
And so how often do you, so if I were to take the class,
mhm.
what would I have to plan on as far as my time face to face or, with you?
Yeah, so the Zooms are the first and third Wednesday of every month, and they start
Mhm.
at 9 a.m. Central Time. So if you know you're going to take the class, I tell people if you can take that time away from clients, just block
Mhm.
yourself off from 9 to 11 Central on the first and third Wednesday of every month.
Mhm.
And then you have 2 weeks to do homework. And then we have
Okay.
another Zoom and you have 2 weeks to do homework. Because like I said, there's a lot of homework. You do market analysis, you do tattooing, you do all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
And so you'd have to plan on that 9 to 11, the first and third. And so that's why it's kind of
Okay.
nice if you plan on taking the class,
Mhm.
because then you can, but we do them live in Zoom and then they get posted into the Facebook page. You get a
Mhm.
private Facebook page where you have 24/7, continuing support. Your classes never get taken away from you. You're always privileged to go back and look at that information. There's no
Mhm.
time lapse on those.
Mhm.
So something comes up and you miss a class, it's not a big deal because it's always recorded.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
I've
So
never met
thanks.
you and you were just so gracious to offer to help me with your own time. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, thanks. Well, now you have homework. So now I want you to do lines and I want you to do ovals and back and forth. And I want you to do some brows, play with some ombres, play with some powder, and send me your work.
Awesome. I will do that. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.